Hi, and welcome to the video on column graphs. By the end of this video, you should be able to draw and read a column graph. So let's see how we create a column graph. We start off with some data. This table shows the number of hours spent on the internet by some students. In the first row, we have the number of hours in the week, and in the second row, we have the number of students. Note the biggest number in the number of students. That's going to be important later. It's good to start with some graph paper if you're drawing a column graph, but if you don't, you're going to need to have a ruler handy. We draw up two lines, a vertical axis and a horizontal axis, and it makes an L shape. On the horizontal axis, we want to put the categories or the independent data. That's the first row in our table. That is the number of hours in the week. So we can space them out, leaving a little gap at the start and a little gap at the end. We're going to put these numbers underneath the columns that we're going to be drawing. On the vertical axis, we want the dependent data. That's the number of students. Now, the biggest number in the number of students is 11. So we should be going up to at least 11 on our vertical graph, on our vertical scale. We start with a 0 and then go up by the same amount as we go up. We could go up by ones, but the numbers get really tight and jumbled. So I've gone up by 2s in this case, and I've actually gone all the way up to 14 on my vertical axis, just so I have a little bit of space at the top. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on some labels. I'm going to put the number of hours on the horizontal axis and the number of students on the vertical axis. Now it's time to put in the columns, and I read the numbers off my table and put them straight in. I need to have a title. That's very important. Something that's going to describe the data that I'm about to look at. And I've just said number of hours spent on the internet each week. Just note that the columns have the same width and they're not joined at all. So they're 2 boxes wide, each of the columns. And the width of the column and the gaps between them should be exactly the same. In this case, 2 boxes. I've left a gap before the first column, and you'll see I've left a gap at the end as well. Here's what the graph looks like without any labels on it. What I'd like you to do is pause and summarize what's on the screen. If you don't have any grid paper, use a ruler accurately in order to draw up this graph. Okay, hopefully you've drawn that and you have a good idea about what a column graph is, how it's created. Now we're going to take a look at an example. Here we have side-by-side column graphs. In the red, we have tea, and in the green, we have coffee. And if I read the title, it says consumption of tea and coffee per head of population in Australia. I note that down the bottom I have the years 1968, 1978, 1988, 1998 and 2000. So it looks like they're going up by decades until we get to the end here. And on the side here I have consumption, and consumption just means how much we're going to be using. And that goes up by kilos, 1 kilo, 2 kilos, 3 kilos. I'm also going to note that I have little boxes here. And each box, if I count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 boxes make up a kilogram. So that means that one box must make up just 100 grams. And that might be important later on. Let's take a look at some of the questions. How much more tea than coffee was drunk in 1968? Well, I'm looking at 1968, the data there, and I just want to look at the difference. Now, I could work out how much tea was drunk and how much coffee was drunk and then subtract them, or I can just count up the difference between them. Now, if I count up the boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 boxes. 10 boxes is 10 times 100 grams, which is 1 kilogram. Now, this is a written question, so we should have a written answer. So 1 kilogram more tea was being drunk per head of population than coffee in 1968. You'll notice that I have a lot of parts to this answer. I have the answer itself, 1 kilogram more tea was being drunk. I've also mentioned per head of population, because if I just say 1 kilogram more tea was being drunk than coffee, then that might say that it's for the whole population of Australia and not just for one person. That's important. I've also mentioned that it's 1968, the data that I'm looking at, so that we don't get confused with any other data. Question number 2. When did coffee drinking exceed tea drinking for the first time? Well, for this one, you just need to know what the word exceed means. Exceed means to be more than. So if I look at 1968, tea is more than coffee, or tea is being drunk more than coffee. Same in 1978. It's when we get to 1988 that coffee first exceeds tea drinking. So that's exactly what I'm going to write. In 1988 was the first year coffee exceeded tea drinking. Question 3. If the population of Australia was 18,500,000 in 1998, how much coffee was consumed in Australia? Well, I want to look at 1998, but more specifically, just the coffee. I want to see how many kilograms of coffee is being drunk. Now, when I get up to this line here, that's 2 kilos, and you can use a ruler to see that more accurately. And if I look at how many boxes above that I got, 1, 2.5, that's 2.25 kilograms. So in 1998, per head of population for everybody in Australia, they were drinking 2.25 kilograms of coffee. So 2.25 kilograms times the 18,500,000 people, that's 41,625,000 kilograms of coffee that was drunk. Now, we're not saying that everybody in Australia drank 2.25 kilograms of coffee. There are non-coffee drinkers out there. There are also little babies that may not drink coffee at all, or the very elderly perhaps may not drink any coffee. So this is actually an average of the total amount drunk in Australia. So we're going to have a written answer for that. In 1998, then we have our answer, 41,625,000 kilograms of coffee was consumed in Australia. Let's look at question 4 now. What is happening in general with the drinking of these two beverages? Well, when we answer a question like this, they're talking about the two beverages, so our answer should mention something about the difference in the two drinks. The consumption of tea, you can see over time, is declining, and the consumption of coffee is increasing over time. That's all you really need for this answer, because that's describing what's happening to both the coffee and the tea. All right, last question. What would you expect to be the consumption of each drink in 2009 if the current trends continue? Well, I'm making this video in 2018, so this is a very old question, but I'm going to keep it at 2009 anyway. What I'm going to do to start off this answer is I'm going to actually work out how much of the tea is being drunk each year and how much coffee is being drunk each year. So in tea, 1968, 2.3 kilos, all the way up to 1998, 1 kilo. When I look at the coffee goes from 1.3 kilos in 1968 all the way up to 2.25 kilos in 1998. I could have looked at 2000, but there's only a 2-year difference, and I'm trying to see what I would expect to happen in future. So here's what I'm going to say. I'm looking at the tea, and I can see that it declines or goes down by 0.6 of a kilogram, then by 0.5, then by 0.2. So it's still declining, but I think it's only declining by a little bit. So what I might say is that the consumption, if the current trends continue, we would expect that in Australia in 2009, that the consumption of tea would be approximately 0.8 kilograms. Now, if you were to say 0.7 or 0.9, something around that area, you'd be perfectly fine because it's what you expect. If you were to say something like 0, or if you were to say a number greater than 1 kilogram, you're probably not reading the data accurately. Now we're going to have a look at coffee. Coffee starts by going up by 0.2 of a kilogram, then by 0.5, then by 0.25. So it's increasing, but it's starting to slow down how much it increases by. So we can already see as well in 2000 that it's increased to 2.5. That's just 2 years afterwards. So in 2009, 9 years later, we would expect this to still continue to increase. So what I've said is that the consumption of coffee would be approximately 2.75 kilograms per head of population. Now, again, if you'd said 2.9 or even 3 kilograms, that's continuing on with the trend. If you'd said 4 or 5 kilograms, that might be increasing by too much. And if you'd said that it had gone lower than that, well, then you probably, again, aren't reading the data very accurately. That's an example of reading a column graph and getting the different types of questions that you might get. That's the end of the video. Nothing to write for that example, just something to go through. As always, you should be able to now draw and read a column graph, and as always, you can contact me on my email, or you can go and check out more videos on my website. Good luck.